All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Monday night edition of the People Show with Mark Wallace, your facilitator here on intellectualradio.com. Every Monday night, 7 o'clock until 9 o'clock, we are talking about the issues that matter to you and that matter to the rest of the Black diaspora. We have so much that we're going to be talking about tonight. You know, we're continuing our, I'm going to call it our education, explanation, information about what is being proposed and what is being done through this administration, the Biden-Harris administration. And boy, we have a lot to talk about. Also, I want to remind you, we are still building, we're still organizing the greatest, largest Black independent voting bloc here in the city of Chicago, county of Cook, and the state of Illinois, so that we can strengthen the power behind all of the great work that many of our organizations are doing. The one thing that we don't have is that we don't have a strong political arm. And our strong political arm is our power to determine who it is that we want to represent us, so that we could select the candidates that we want to represent us, rather than somebody telling us who it is that we will have to choose from. So what 10 by 10 to win is, it is that political arm to build that voting bloc and to build a voting bloc for the Black community in Chicago, Cook County, and the state of Illinois, so that we could have a united bloc that from within our own, we determine who it is that we want to select, slate, and then elect. So we'll have our own internal process of choosing candidates that we could determine who we want to be candidates. Then we go out and we work the grounds to make sure that we get them the signatures that they need to have to get on the ballot, and that we support them with the resources, the monies that's needed to support them with, to get them on the ballot. And so our goal is to build here in Chicago, Cook County, and the state of Illinois, the greatest voting bloc of Black voters. The goal is to get to 1 million. We want to get to that first phase of 200,000 voters. 200,000 voters in a block will be a significant force of power to determine elections in Chicago, Cook County, and in the state of Illinois. And if we, at 200,000 people, we could raise all of the resources that we need. We don't have to worry about outside resources or someone from the outside compromising what our objectives are for our communities, for what we believe and know that we need and that we want and that we can demand to make sure that our communities are thriving, not just surviving, but to thrive. We don't want to just get by. We don't want people just getting by. We want people thriving at every level, whether they are at a job, in a career, or in a business. That we want for every sector of our communities to thrive. And we have the wherewithal. We don't have the power. And the reason why we don't have the power is because we haven't organized it. We have access to it. And this is what we have to do in order for us to have that political muscle to make the kinds of demands that we want and that we need for our communities without having to capitulate or to having anybody to be compromised, selling out our communities. That is the one thing that we have not done as a people. We vote. We participate in voting at higher rates than any other ethnic group. What we haven't done with our vote is we haven't organized it and we haven't strategically used it in the way that we want, and that it benefits us, and that we have control over legislatures. We have the wherewithal to do that. That is the purpose of building a block, so that we could have a block that will give power behind our organizations that are already doing the great work out there in education, in economics, in health, reparations, whatever the area of work that they are working in. But they don't have the kinds of strength behind them, because we haven't done the one thing that many of our leaders that we have looked to, many of the people that we have respected, have alluded to down through the years. We are making a conscious decision and a commitment to building and getting past all of those idiosyncrasies that keep us separated from each other, keep us disconnected from each other, keep us from not trusting each other. 10 by 10 to win is that political apparatus. Now, the reason why we have that political apparatus, and I'm going to give you, as soon as I turn this off here, I don't want people calling me. All right, of what that is, and we're going to go right into it. The purpose of 10 by 10 to win. Why is it called 10 by 10 to win? Because every one of us knows 10 people who trust our voice. You know 10 people who trust you. I know 10 people who trust me, and so on and so on and so on. And so if we're building this block 10 by 10, then we're going to have a block of trusted voices. So we won't have to worry about the distrust of this person, that, because we will be a block of voters, that there will be a block of familiar people in this block who trust each other. And as a result of that, we can break through all of those blockades, I call them, blockages, that have kept us from doing the one thing that we need to do in order to be the powerful force that we can be. And to be the powerful force that we can be, is we've got to build that block of voters that we can make and self-determine who it is that we're going to have in public office. And if we are determining the people in public office, then that means that we get to set the agenda of the public policy that is brought forth, and to make sure that our communities are included, that the resources that are coming out of those policies, resources is money, that are coming out of those policies that cover all the gamut from education to economics, that those monies flow through the veins of our communities as they flow through the veins of every other community, making those communities' hearts beat strong and thrive. That they have communities that are safe, they have communities that are vibrant, they have communities that are healthy, they have communities that have great learning institutions and have great infrastructure, they have peace, they have harmony in their communities. And we have, finally, when we get to that point, we can then call the city of Chicago and all of the communities where we live world-class communities. That is possible, but it's not possible if we don't get our house in order. The one piece that we don't have in order, because we've got all the brains, we've got all the information, we've got all the talent, and the one piece that we don't have is the piece of cohesiveness, of bringing that all together as a political arm to do the one thing is to push and give the power to those people who are doing the work. That's what 10 by 10 to win is. It's our political arm and our umbrella by which we move all of those agendas that those organizations that now we're all connected to, and they feed us the information and tell us what it is that they're doing and what it is that they need and what it is that we are working for. And the entire block is behind that effort. And it just keeps repeating itself. No, we don't have to start new organizations. We got the organizations. We keep the same organizations. We get behind the work that each of those organizations are doing. That's the purpose of 10 by 10 to win. Now, text 10x10 to the number 909. I'm sorry, to the number 855-909-1385 so that you can get into the text alert. I'll put it in the chat so that so it'll be there. Just text 10x10 to the number 855-909-1385 so that you can get into the text alert, and you'll receive the text alerts of all of the updates that we're going to be doing. This Wednesday at the DuSable Museum, of course, it is Juneteenth. We are celebrating Juneteenth, but in Juneteenth, in celebrating, it is not just about a party. It is not about a cookout. It is about doing the work and making sure that we continue to do what they did in 1865, where the Union soldiers had to come in to go to Texas to federally protect those people who were still being enslaved, although the law had been passed 2 years prior, and they didn't know it because states, the so-called states' rights, did not allow for those people who were freed to go free. And so the federal government had to step in. And June 19th of 1865, those people were given their freedom. And so we're doing and continuing that work, even though we're honoring what took place on this Wednesday, June 19th, Juneteenth at the DuSable Museum. There's all kinds of Juneteenth events that have been going on starting this past weekend. We're going to be at the DuSable Museum participating with Dr. Kim Delaney, who is responsible for the African American series and education at DuSable Museum. So we're going to be participating there. We'll have a booth there. I will be speaking at one of the sessions there. So we're going to be talking about voter engagement. We're going to be talking about voter organizing and the purpose of that. So we'll be there on Wednesday. So come on out to the DuSable Museum. It's free for everybody. There will be all kinds of activities going on, all kinds of education that's going on, all kinds of events, even though we'll be celebrating, but we will continuously be working to make sure that we protect local states, our communities, and making sure that our federal government protects the rights of all of our people, all of its people. That is what we're going to be doing on this Wednesday. So make sure you come out to join us for that. All right, some great things were going on this past weekend. The 100 Black Men had their 38th annual convention down in Atlanta. And there was all kinds of people who were there. Andy Young was there. I've got some clips from it that I'm going to be sharing with you. And the White House that is doing this tour, Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris is doing a tour going around the country talking about the economic empowerment and the things that the Biden-Harris administration are doing for Black economic and educational empowerment, the things that they're doing. I'm going to be talking more about what they are actually doing and some of the things that the investments that they're making right here in Illinois, so that you have the facts over the fiction, over the noise, over the clutter of all of the misinformation that is out there by people who want to, I guess, operate in a vacuum of misinformation and disinformation and wanting ignorance, whatever bucket that they fall in. I don't want for you to be misinformed. I don't want for you to be misled. I want you to be informed with the facts so that you know exactly what is going on and why it is not a choice between the lesser of two evils, why it is a choice for playing the long game to continue making sure that what has started continues so that our communities will get the benefits, will be able to participate at levels that we have not seen in our lifetimes. And certainly things that are taking place in this administration, we need for those policies to take full root and to continue, those things that they're proposing to continue so that our communities will thrive. It is important that we have to play the long game. You cannot play the short game, and you cannot get into these ignorant postures of thinking that somebody has to snap a finger and it's going to wipe away hundreds of years of disinvestment, hundreds of years of Jim Crow, hundreds of years of racial bias in policies and undoing all of that. That's not going to happen in a 4-year period. We have to play the long game. We have to play the long game. But there is no evidence that there has been any policies put in place that have been more aggressive towards moving us to that direction. We have a long way to go, a long way to go. But I think that it has been great beyond certainly my wildest imagination that this administration would have been as progressive, as liberal as it has been in getting policies passed, much of what was not supported by Republicans, and those that were supported by Republicans were only a few. But the president likes to call them bipartisan because you got a few Republicans that voted for them. And so I want to go through that information, and I want to make sure that we continue to unfold policies that have been passed and policies that are being proposed that we are all going to be better by if we continue along this path. And the importance of why you must be informed. If you're not informed, get the information, and then you must inform those people who are in your trusted circles. 10 by 10 to win continues to work. That theory is a theory that we have to continue to utilize that model. The people who trust you, you have to provide them with the information. If you trust me, I'm going to provide you with the facts, with the facts and the figures. The old saying is, liars figures, the figures don't lie. We have the receipts, and we're going to give them to you so that you can take them back and you can share them in your trusted circles. So this past weekend, Kamala Harris, the White House, made somewhat of a shift and sent her down to Atlanta. And she wanted to go there to speak at the 100 Black Men's Convention there. And Steve Harvey was the moderator. And so she talked about some things. She talked about economic empowerment. They talked about education. They talked about a whole lot of information of what it is that the administration is doing. And the important thing is that the administration, and some of us are saying that starting in January, but we know that many people have these short attention spans. So so Kamala Harris was there, and let's just roll some of the tapes and let's see Steve Harvey.
It's a lot of things you've been doing. This past fall, you had a Fight for Our Freedoms college tour.
Yeah.
And you talked to over 15,000 college students to expand upon all of the urgent issues that concerned us as a people. And you've been traveling across the country doing a lot of other things. And just recently, after addressing the epidemic of gun violence and women's rights, reproductive rights, and all of this that seem to have taken away, you've launched an economic opportunity tour. So tell us a little bit about this tour and why you launched it.
So I'll start by talking about where we are right now. So this hotel, many may know, was referred to as the Hotel of Hope. This was the only hotel that allowed Dr. King to speak. And it was here in this very ballroom that Dr. King gave one of his last speeches. I think it was the last one in his Poor People's Campaign, talking about, of course, what he was on the verge of doing, which was to merge the civil rights movement which is, of course, a movement about justice, with the movement around economic justice. And it was shortly after he was here that he was assassinated. And so the symmetry of being here as the first Black Vice President of the United States to talk about the importance of growing economic opportunity for the community is something that I feel very strongly about. And so I'm doing this tour. Thank you. So I'm doing this tour mostly because I believe that for those of us who do the kind of work that our administration is doing, that President Biden and I are doing, in order for it to be real, it's got to hit the streets. And the only way that that will happen in a meaningful way is if the people are aware of what is available to them and then take advantage of that. So I wanted to come and speak to 100 Black men, to this organization, because I know who everyone here is. This is a room full of leaders of every age who can help get the word out about what we have made available, because it's so important people take advantage of what's available. So I'm doing this tour to, one, highlight the importance of speaking truth about the obstacles that have existed for access to capital, for home ownership, for Black folks, and what we are doing to actually deal with those obstacles in a way that we create opportunity. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. So, for example, what we're doing around reduction of debt forgiveness, what we are doing to address the racial wealth gap as it relates to a number of issues, including access to capital for our small businesses and entrepreneurs, what it means in terms of housing discrimination, and the work that we need to do and will continue to do to address those issues. And really the essence of this tour is born out of a belief that people need more than just what is necessary to get by. We want to get ahead. And we know that it is important that we have reduced Black unemployment to historic lows, but that's a baseline, which is that people have a job. In our community, we also have ambition, aspirations, incredible ideas. And the division between that and actually being able to put it to use is often about access to the relationships of the capital that can take us from those good ideas to creating a business, starting a business, growing a business. So that's why I'm doing this tour.
Okay, so she also talked about homeownership, which we're going to come back to, but I want to talk about in between this. In between showing some of the things that she's talking about, the things that they're doing, and the things that the administration is doing. I want to show it to you because we're here in Illinois, and those of you who watch the program, watch the show here in Chicago, here in Illinois, and certainly some of my hometown friends that also chime in and watch the program, but largely the people here in Chicago. So a part of that administration, and what they are doing in terms of making sure that these are investments that are coming out of the historic legislative accomplishments that come out of this administration, growing opportunities, making great strides for economic opportunities for Black families throughout communities, and certainly through the passage of the American Rescue Plan, the Infrastructure Bill, the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and of course, many of the landmark executive orders that President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have gotten done over the past 3.5 years, which is why we have to continue to support them to continue that work, or to have all of it unraveled if we don't do what we need to do, and to stopping the Republicans for putting in the person that they want to put in, not because that person is going to do it, but because this is a person that they can set policy and he signs off on it. That's what that administration will be all about. That's why Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell and all of those folks, Mike Johnson over in the House, that's why they want Donald Trump. Not because Donald Trump is legislatively and politically bright. He is not. It is because Donald Trump just wants to be the person in power, and they will tell him these are the policies that we need to put into place, and he will sign off on it. That is what that is going to be about. But those policies putting in place will unravel, all of which I am about to share with you. These are the investments that are coming to Illinois as a result of bills proposed by the Biden-Harris administration and disposed of by Congress. 15 in this first phase, $15.7 billion coming to Illinois through the infrastructure law funding. That is going to in 88 projects in Illinois, and 488 projects in Illinois, new projects that in many respects will go 10, 20, 30 years. People will be able to start careers and retire in many of these projects because they will fuel other projects. $11.1 billion in transportation, to include $6.7 billion in roads and bridges, $2.9 billion in public transit, $494 million in airports, $268 million in ports and waterways. These are just some of the investments all coming to Illinois because of the administration that we currently have and the policies that they've been able to get passed. That's coming to Illinois. We have to make sure that those monies that's coming to Illinois, that the governor and the legislature, which we have a black lieutenant governor, and we have 22 state representatives and 10 state senators and 4 black United States Congress people. We have all these people here on the federal level and on the state level. Then when you come to our local communities, 17 black mayors in the south suburbs, a black mayor in the city of Chicago, 20 black aldermen, 6 black Cook County Board commissioners, a black Cook County Board president, and a host of other black elected officials, commissioners, water reclamation, and all of these other areas. So all of these black people who are in these positions of power, a black city treasurer, all of these people who are in power, in positions of power, those monies are going to be flowing through these agencies. So we can thank the federal government, we can thank President Biden and Kamala Harris for proposing in Congress, for disposing and passing these legislations and making these investments. These are the investments for Illinois. I'm probably going to try, if I have a little time, to go through some investments that are going through other states as well. But right now I'm talking about the investments that's coming to Illinois, and I'll continue to share that information with you. So when you have people who are out here talking about the Democrats are not doing this, or the Democrats, or Kamala Harris hasn't done this, or Kamala Harris hasn't done that, these are people who either are woefully misinformed and don't want to read, don't want to spend some time looking and going through, taking the effort to go through the details and to bring out the information and understand how government works and how these policies come into being and what they actually are. They'd rather get on some of these platforms and just bloviate and just shoot out misinformation, and the people who actually trust them believe what they're saying and run off misinformed and repeat misinformation. Well, this is information that you will be able to go and verify. None of the information that I am telling you is misinformation. It is the facts, and you will be able to go and verify that. Because I refuse to mislead you with misinformation or disinformation. Period. I am not one of these people who live by the philosophy that we can agree to disagree. I don't live by that philosophy. I don't think that it is healthy for us to continue to live under that cloak of we can agree to disagree. Why can't we agree to agree on the facts? Because you have to agree on the facts. An opinion is an opinion, but it has to be based and rooted in something. But a fact is something that both sides will have to acknowledge that it is the fact. It's irrefutable. And so the information I'm giving you is the factual information. Whether you agree with the policy or not, that's certainly your right to think or opinionate or opine on the policy. But I'm just giving you the facts of what's happening so that we put ourselves in the position. Because these are policies already passed, and these are policies, money that's starting to be distributed. And we need to make sure that we're in the path of the distribution of those resources for our communities to have significant investments over the significant disinvestments that have been happening to our communities. So Vice President Kamala Harris went on to talk about home ownership. Now, we all know about the disadvantages in real estate and the biasness and the racial biasness in real estate. I was just reading in an article in yesterday's Tribune where a black woman who was in the market to buy a home, had never bought a home, Dr. Raven Baxter, down in Virginia, saw this home, $749,000 house, and she placed the asking offer to the property. Now, the seller of the property never saw her because she saw the property by way of video. And she had her broker to put the offer in at the asking price. When the seller of the property, a white woman by the name of Jane Walker, 84 years old, who decided that she was going to violate the Fair Housing Act of 1968 and the Civil Rights Act of 1866, that she was going to violate this black woman's civil rights and violate the law, and didn't care about violating the law because she didn't want to sell her home to her because she is black. Now they went on and according to the article that they salvaged the deal, and it is due to close sometime later this summer. But the company that listed the property was Berkshire Hathaway, which is owned by Warren Buffett, and they basically got involved, or obviously the higher ups got involved and said that we're not going to allow this, we're not going to tolerate it, it's not legal, it's against the law. But the woman's rights have already been violated. I would think that she could still be able to certainly take some action. Now, what kind of harm is done, I don't know. But our civil rights certainly have been violated. But the point is that this racial bias and redlining and disenfranchisement, even when people can afford it, a $750,000 home that this woman placed an offer on to purchase. And she is a molecular biologist. And who certainly, this is her first home that she is buying down in Virginia Beach. But this is the kind of thing that is still very prevalent. And so the vice president went on to talk about home ownership and the racial biasness into home ownership. Take a look.
Before y'all start calling my radio show and DMing me, talking about why you ain't asked no hard-hitting questions, that ain't what this is. I'm throwing a lob. This is an alley-oop for a dunk, because this administration needs to get the word out of what they're actually doing and what they're actually accomplishing, so we can stop all this foolishness about what you're doing for black people. Can't nobody come out with no agenda and call it this for black people and expect to get in the White House. You got to play the game different. Y'all know what this is. So now this next question is another lob for her to dunk. Because they done a lot, man. But we see, I'm on this radio show and I'm hearing all these people talking about, I'm not voting if they not doing nothing for us. Listen to me. If you do not vote, the analytics will show. They know how many women vote, they know the age you are when you vote. If we don't vote, how we gonna ask for something next time? If you ain't got no voting power, you talking about reparations. Ain't nobody finna give you no reparations and you don't vote. Oh, why you think they finna give us some money? No how, man. I hope they do. They owe us. I'll go down there. I'm sorry. Madam, I know I ain't coming back next year. I already appreciate y'all having me. Madam Vice President, this is another part of this conversation because it affects us all. It's about housing. And another thing that you've been involved in over the years has been about housing, and it remains a priority for families all across the country. So talk more about the work that's being done to address the obstacles that's being presented in front of all of us as we try to gain housing.
So you're right, Steve. I mean, back when I was Attorney General of California, I sued the 5 biggest banks of the country during the foreclosure crisis. And you'll remember that a lot of black families were targeted with those promises of these loans, 0 payment down, and people ended up going bankrupt. So this is something I've focused on for a long time. And here again, let's look at it through the context of obstacles and opportunities. So home ownership is probably one of the most effective and efficient and fastest ways to grow intergenerational wealth. Just think about it in this context. You own a home and then your child says, you know, Daddy, I want to go to Howard University. Yes. And you can say to your child, honey, you don't have to take out some loans to do that. I'll take some equity out of the house. Or let's say your daughter says, I want to start a small business. And you can say to your child, honey, you don't have to take out a loan. I will take some equity out of the house to give you some startup capital. Intergenerational wealth.
She talked about intergenerational wealth, but she went on to continue to talk about what they and how we could use that and what they were proposing for the future, and certainly if they get a second term to continue doing the work that they're doing. Take a look.
Okay, but that's a fact. Now let's talk about other facts. Let's talk about, we don't even need to go as far back as 48 because a mule never happened. Let's go to the GI Bill. You know, we just celebrated D-Day. So remember, we call them the greatest generation, those mostly men who went to war and put America on the map as a leader around global peace and security. So the United States government, in essence, said, the people said, you are the greatest generation. You sacrificed so much. We owe you, and we believe in you. And there were policies then to boost their standing through loans, specific grants given to them to buy homes. So here was this incredible boost. Here's the reality. Black servicemen because of what we know to be racial bias and racism in the system, did not receive those loans at the same rate. So where you saw public policy that was about a boost, right? We had disparities before that happened. And then you see the disparities grow even more. Take into account segregation, redlining, urban renewal, where in so many black cities in particular, they would build freeways straight through the neighborhood, which would cut the business community, commerce off from the neighborhoods. Over and over again, we have seen these inflection points in the history of our country that have set folks back around home ownership. So one thing that we have to do is speak truth about that. And the second piece of it then is, what are we going to do to accommodate the fact that we have far too many folks who, for example, in black families, there's no history in their immediate family of home ownership. What are we doing to give them a boost? So we are proposing a policy, which we are on track to getting done, so that if you are the first generation in your family to go for home ownership, you'll get a $25,000 credit for down payment. And if you are first in your family generationally, first-time home ownership, qualify for $400 a month in credits to go toward paying your mortgage. So these are some of the issues that we are seeking to address. There's another issue. Home appraisals. Again, it's about speaking truth, right? So, and I have to give great credit to the former Secretary of HUD, Marcia Fudge, who we worked on this for a while, and so this is where it is. Home appraisals. How many people here have heard the story about a black family wants to sell their home or maybe take out a second mortgage, needs to get the home appraised for its value? And they call in the appraiser. The appraiser comes in and appraises it for a certain number. The family knows that's too low. So then they get in touch with some friends of the family who are white and say, why don't y'all come over with your family pictures? We'll take ours down. You invite an appraiser over. The house appraises for higher. Racial bias in home appraisals is a real issue. Again, contributing to what we would see then in terms of disparities around the ability to accumulate and grow wealth. So what we have done is we are now requiring that home appraisers receive racial bias training to address, again, what are these seemingly small issues, but are very big issues when you talk about the overall ability of folks to catch up and to build the kind of wealth that we know is an entitlement, is a right of every hardworking person. So that's part of what we're doing on home ownership.
So these are the facts. These are what is happening in the Biden-Harris administration. These are things that they're doing. That proposal is a federal program. Now, we've had some of those programs that are helping on local levels, on state levels, but this is a federal program that is going to help, significantly help, first-time home buyers in black communities. Kamala Harris has been doing this work long before she became the vice president. She did great work in making sure that even when she was in the Senate, when the Trump administration was in power and they wanted to zero out, in which they did, zero out funding for HBCUs, which was $90 million in their budget. Alma Adams, from North Carolina, got it put back in with a Democratic control Congress, got it put back into the budget, passed it, president signed it. This two-time president, I saw him on one of Roland Martin's show, talking about how they had to go in and help the president understand the importance of these fundings. He had no idea. So all of the information or misinformation that he's going around touting about what he did was certainly not true. Just taking credit for it, but he didn't do it. I mean, HBCUs have been receiving funding since 1965. This didn't start under Trump, but they've been receiving funding, millions of dollars from the federal government going back. Largely been supported by bipartisan Republicans and Democrats, because they know that this is a good thing to do. Largely by Democrats, but certainly supported also by Republicans. Never in the history have there been, and there are many HBCU presidents that are saying the same thing, but never in the history of the presidency since 1966 has any president gone to bat at funding for HBCUs harder than the Biden-Harris administration. Kamala Harris comes out of an HBCU, Howard University. And $16 billion out of this administration in the last 3.5 years, going to HBCUs, not to HSIs, HBCUs. See, the $250 million, of which the $90 million that HBCUs got during the Trump administration, the $250 million goes to all institutions, which is about 500 that consider themselves to be HSI, which is Hispanic serving institutions. And your institutions only have to have 25% of their enrollment to be considered a Hispanic serving institution, like Harvard, Princeton, any of those universities that have 25% Hispanic enrollment qualify as an HSI. But we're talking about HBCUs, $16 billion to HBCUs. Also, the land grant colleges, HBCUs, that the federal government has sent to the states to fund these HBCUs, they have been shorted some $12 billion that the federal government sent to the states, and the states never gave that money. President Biden has sent letters to the 16 colleges that owe these institutions, or the 16 banks that 16 governors that owe these institutions the money, to give them their money. Imagine a couple $1 billion in an institution, hires and puts all kinds of infrastructure in place for an institution. That means a world of a difference in an HBCU. So this president, $16 billion in this administration in the last 3.5 years are going to HBCUs as a result of the Biden-Harris administration. Now, what she was talking about there in terms of the disparity in appraisals, she's talking about a black family that had a home. They bought the home, paid $200,000 for the home, put a lot of money into the home over the years, wanted to get the home refinanced. Years later, went, applied, great credit, great income, and great value. The appraisal comes out, appraises their home, appraised the home for $700,000. They knew that that was the wrong number because there was no home in that area that was valued for less than $1.2 million, because they had made all these improvements over the years. They then went and they got one of their friends that was in an interracial marriage and asked them to bring their photographs as well as to stand in as the owner of the home. The exact same house, in the exact same place, only 2 weeks apart, appraised at $1.5 million. And the only difference was there was a white stand-in with pictures of white people in the home. The federal government did a study, 47 million appraisals, 47 million appraisals. And what they consistently found, that homes that were similar in size, similar in style, similar in social economic conditions, they consistently shows that the homes were appraised lower by those who own the homes that were black than their white counterparts, even though the socioeconomics and the style, conditions of the homes, markets where the homes were similar. The only thing that was not similar is the ethnicity of the owners. And the owners that were black got lower appraisals, and the owners that were white got higher appraisals. Consistently throughout this report, 47 million appraisals. It happened to me right here in Chicago. I sold a unit just last month. The appraisal came out and appraised the unit $55,000 below the asking price, which was a full offer asking price, $55,000. There's no way that I was accepting that. The same property, I had an independent appraiser to review it, and he clearly showed how this person lowballed this appraisal and lowballed my unit. The buyer of the property still wanted the property and went to a different institution. We rebutted it, but here in Illinois, you can refute an appraisal, but the complaint only goes back to the appraiser, and the appraiser themselves would have to be the person who makes the decision to reverse their opinion. So they went to a different institution. They went to a different bank, and the bank was Huntington Bank. Different appraisal. The appraisal came out at $1,000 higher than the asking price. It happened before, 2 years ago. So I recently had a conversation with State Senator L.G. Sims, who's going to be my new neighbor, and said to him that we really need to put something in place here in Illinois. We need to have an appraisal oversight committee in place. People from varying different markets who understand these markets, that when we have these kinds of dispute, that there is an oversight committee to review these appraisals that have been underappraised and undervalued, and that when we find appraisals or appraisers that are misrepresenting the value, that are undervaluing properties, and if they have a continued practice of it, there has to be some accountability in place. He told me that he was already working on something like that, but these are the kinds of things that this administration is putting into place. Now, I think that they have to go harder. I think that they certainly have to, there have to be some stronger measures in place, some stronger accountability measures in place to make sure that Black communities are not being undervalued. Because if you are only using one measure to determine the value, and you're only using history to determine the value of properties in Black communities, there is no room for growth. There is no allowance for there to be any type of increase, any type of growth in value. So these are the kinds of things, again, that this administration is doing. They also spoke to Andy Young, and they got comments from people after the convention. Roland Martin was there, and he was on one of the panels. Now, let me just say, I think that it is important for all of our, or certainly those of us who understand what is happening, it's important for us to make sure that we get the information out to the various different audiences in our communities, so that we have a synthesis of understanding of what the information is, and that information is being put out so that people can go and verify that information, and they can go and share that and have a better understanding of what's actually being done. This is more than somebody being entertained. Hopefully that, you could have some sort of entertainment value. But here's Andy Young and what his comments
Can't
were.
think of anybody that stays on target as regularly and as timely as she is. We don't ever respect our own. It took us a long time to get used to the fact that Barack Obama was president. Now we know he was amongst the best. I think the same of Kamala Harris. I think what she does in the rooms that we don't go into is you always have a voice. Actually, she comes from Howard University, and California, she was the district attorney. She was the attorney general of San Francisco. She was the senator from California, and now she's been vice president. And she's always done well.
That was Andy Young, who's the former mayor of Atlanta. Andy Young and what was I always get them mixed up. Maynard Jackson. They were mayors that served. Maynard came right after Andy, but they institutionalized policies down in Atlanta where Black folks are participating in contracts down there. If you're going to go and do business with Atlanta, you got to make sure that you hire and that you participate with people in the community there. Black folks own 51% of the airport in Atlanta. I don't know if you all knew that or not, but this has been institutionalized where they have the largest population down in Atlanta. Atlanta is about 65-70% Black, and came very close at one time, almost twice, because of low voter turnout at having a white mayor elected there. But they certainly got past that. But they have institutionalized it, that it is ingrained, it's in the policy there, that you've got to include Black people into your upward mobility in Atlanta. We've got to learn the same thing here in Chicago, where we are. So we have to put ourselves in the position to make sure that the people here that we put into office don't think that there's some sort of stain about making sure that Black people are included in the upward mobility and are prospering and have access to contracts. Black people should have 30% participation of all contracts in the city of Chicago, the county of Cook, and the state of Illinois. Period. We've got more than 30% of Black people represented in public offices, but that hasn't reciprocated down to the public. That's got to change. Also got some other comments from some of the young men that were in the audience as to what they thought of the speech from Vice President Kamala Harris. Let's listen to what they had to say.
Any thoughts about the Vice President's session?
The Vice President's session was great, and she empowered us to understand exactly what the administration has been doing throughout their tour. So we look forward to going to the polls and expressing our votes.
Very excited about the economic tour. The ideas they have about home ownership, amazing. And Steve Harvey did a great job too. It was amazing in that experience. Really liked it.
Thoughts on what the VP had to say today?
Extremely inspiring.
Hey man, look, this is probably the best conversation I've had or seen with her. I mean, she came with it, and you know, it's not like she was very natural. It wasn't like she was trying to put on her shoulder or anything. It was like, you know, she was sincere. Something like what you do. So, you know, I was very impressed, man, how she rolled, man.
It's extremely inspiring, especially us, our chapter being from the Bay Area. See somebody homegrown on a national stage representing, you know, what she's done for the Black community, specifically around business loans and debt relief. That's something that's extremely important and something we've talked about here at this conference. Is how entrepreneurs such as, you know, small business owners, Black-owned businesses can not only, you know, lay out the groundwork to be funded, but take advantage of federal, national, state, and local RFPs, requests for proposals, those contracts. Not enough of those contracts go to our Black businesses. If more of them knew that they could apply and, like you said, get renewed time after time after time again, we'd be more empowered. It's an awesome conversation.
All right, cool. Anybody else?
Look at that, man.
Yes. I think it was just motivational, inspirational, and it's really a great example of leadership and how we need to follow the leader on this one so we can reach the goals that have collectively been set to improve our community.
Really appreciate her coming and whatnot. It was a lot of stuff that I learned in the session that I wasn't aware of before. Yeah, that's pretty much all I gotta say. We definitely gonna do our part by, you know, spreading the word on everything that she was talking about today. Yeah.
I feel like it's important to be educated on what the administration is actually doing, and she did just that to ensure that we can get the right results come November.
We'll go.
They say knowledge is power, and Kamala Harris just taught me a lot. So I feel.
All right, cool. All right. What's your thoughts on Vice President, what she had to say today?
I think it was great. I think it was informational. I enjoyed myself.
Cool.
I think something that's really important is getting people registered to vote, especially during the Juneteenth holiday when we think about our communities and how important it is to strengthen them.
I think it was amazing that she shared exactly what it is the administration is doing to help our communities. Too often we criticize without information. Now we've got information, the 100 Black Men of America through its membership. Got to make sure that the community is aware that this administration is supporting our small businesses and our young people.
I like how she stated all the stuff that she's done in the past and stuff that she did before she was vice president to help change the community and about the debt. And even if you have a criminal record, now you can apply for a loan. And I also liked how she said everybody needs to vote.
Anybody else?
I like how she talked about home ownership in the Black community and the advantages of being a homeowner and the challenges that come with being a homeowner. Even when you become a homeowner and you're Black, it's just more challenges that's added on to it. And I just like how she talked about like different stuff in the Black community.
Cool.
You know, I really like how, I was really moved by what she was saying, you know, especially when she was talking about, you know, how she eat no for breakfast. Like, you know, that's really motivated me to, like, you know, don't let people tell me no and stuff like that. So,
I thought it was really nice. She was talking about how they're helping the economy and that the policies that they are putting the policies into fruition. I really I enjoyed that. I enjoyed her telling the youth to vote and how important it was.
So, it seemed like they had a very successful convention down there in Atlanta. But more importantly, I love the one common theme in those comments were from the, well, they're all younger men to me, but the very young said how much they learned. That is probably a very overlooked term, is learning. Listen and learn. You don't have to be loud, but listen and learn about what's going on. Get the information. Get informed. It is one thing that bugs me is that people enter into conversations and you hear people with the clutter and just clapping of their gums with information or misinformation, just out and out misinformation. And some of it may be legitimate frustration, but I think more of it is frustration because of you just not knowing, or you're not willing to learn. You're not willing to sit down. You're not willing to do the research. You're not willing to get the information, to get the facts, to get beyond the fiction and the fodder and, the nonsense of, I don't like Joe Biden because he signed the crime bill. Well, let's talk about that. There are over 400 members in Congress, 100 in the Senate, 300 and some odd, 400 and some odd, 300 and some odd out in the House. And the crime bill that everybody wants to espouse to Joe Biden, who was one of the authors, along with many law enforcement agencies. This was not one person who sat down and just penned all of these recitals in this crime bill. It was a bad bill. There's no question about it. It disproportionately impacted Black communities. But the war on drugs didn't start with Joe Biden. The war on Black men started way back with Richard Nixon, put on steroids through Ronald Reagan, continued through Bush, continued through Clinton with this so-called crimes bill. All but 8 of the representatives of Congress signed on to the crime bill, including Black representatives. They all ran on it. They all ran on it because it was the Get Tough on Crime bill. So they all ran on it. So this whole idea of trying to espouse this to one person is simply wrong. It's wrong. The president signed it into law. Many people in Congress passed it. And many people who look like you and I voted for it. So, let's not have these misplaced frustrations to try to justify your wrongful position. However, that said, but let's even take that theory. Let's take that theory. Joe Biden was wrong. Wasn't a good thing. I don't know too many other people in public office that has been in public office that has an recognizable, identifiable reversal of policies, or if you would call some sort of reconciliation or redemption. Joe Biden was not somebody that I was high on when he announced that he was running for president. I wasn't that excited about that. I wasn't excited about it when he was vice president. But the kinds of policies and the kinds of governing that Joe Biden has demonstrated as president of the United States of America has been nothing short of remarkable. Nothing short of remarkable. Joe Biden as president, I believe, as a man who is 80 years old, and that experience and wisdom and opportunity to say, we've got to get this right. We've got to make right some wrongs that we did in the past. I believe that all of those experiences are playing a part of the kinds of governing that he is doing currently to try to correct some of those ills of the past and to moving us through a greater future. None of you in our lifetime can point to a presidency that has been as progressive in governing and passing landmark legislation that directly impacts in a most positive way Black communities than this administration. Not Barack Obama, who did some great things. Not Bill Clinton, who did some good things. Not one of my favorite people, Jimmy Carter, who did some good things. Not Ronald Reagan. Not George Herbert Walker Bush. Not George W. Bush. Certainly not Donald Trump. None of them. The kinds of policies that we have, and I am going to look for them. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get them tonight, but if I don't get them tonight, next week, I am going to go through some of the states where some of you live and some of the red states where Republicans voted against policies that they're now touting and bragging about, that's lifting their communities, at what has come through this administration and these landmarks legislations. Illinois, and this is just the first phase of it, which is why I think it is imperative that we get organized to participate and to make sure that we don't get passed over with these resources that are coming to our states, that are coming to our cities, that are coming to our municipalities. The president and the vice president and Congress, the president has proposed, Congress has disposed. And the money is coming to our various states. They're not going to come here. They can't come here and say, you give this community this and you give this community that. That's our responsibility to make sure that our representatives represent equitably those items, those areas of importance, from education to economics, to lift our communities out of the doldrums. to lift black communities out of the doldrums, to invest the billions and billions and attract industries to our communities so that our communities can thrive for the future, for decades to come, way beyond any of our existence. That is where we are. That's where we are going. But if we are foolish and ignorantly emotional to suggest that Republicans who have never put forth a policy, one policy, one piece of legislation that you can point to that is significant investment to the average working person or family, or certainly for the black community. Not one. I have challenged you over and over, those of you who think that somehow the alternative, Republicans, especially this crop of Republicans, are somehow better for black communities. And I know that you all like to say, well, you know, black folks used to vote Republican all the time. Yeah, when Republicans represent what Democrats represent today. But black folks got tired of Herbert Hoover when Franklin Delano Roosevelt came into place. Republicans took a shift. And became the Republicans of the day. That's why black folks made the transition. Check your history out. Don't just emote. Don't be led down a wrong pathway. I don't want you to be misinformed. I want you to have the facts so that you'll know why it is the direction that we need to go. Are things perfect? Of course they're not. They're never going to be. You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. And certainly the people who are in these positions aren't perfect. But we have to work with the group that we can best get things done. And we have to push them to do more. This is the greatest opportunity as black people in terms of government governing in the direction that gives a great or good start. We have to continue and work the long game. You have to play the long game. You can't play the short game. First of all, there is no such thing as a snap, crackle, and pop, and everything is all good. That's not the way government works. That's not the way processes work. It takes time. But look at what is happening. Look at just one state, and I'm going to deal with some other states. If I find those tonight, I will deal. But let's just look at one state, the state that I'm in, through the infrastructure bill, $15.7 billion coming to Illinois. I told you this earlier, 488 projects, $11.1 billion in transportation, $6.7 billion in roads and bridges. These are all going to create thousands of jobs. Not only are they going to create thousands of jobs, but as a result of creating thousands of jobs, it creates opportunities for businesses to start which will also create jobs. But we also need to make sure that in these investments, as we are attracting businesses, that our representatives roll up their sleeve and attract businesses and industries to come to our communities. In Chicago, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, 70% of all employment in Chicago, of all Black employment, 70% of all Black employment in Chicago was in labor in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. You could leave high school and go into a manufacturer and get a good paying job that was 10, 15, 20 minutes from your home. Many people worked those jobs as careers, bought homes, bought cars, took their family on vacation, sent their children to school, and supported the businesses and supported the local political apparatus. On the south and west sides of Chicago, many Black businesses. We lost a lot of Black businesses. 41% of Black businesses were lost during COVID. Through the Biden-Harris administration investments, 75% of those businesses have recovered. Those kind of numbers, there is no evidence that you could find that Republicans in the past 50 years have legislated any type of policies to infuse and to support Black communities. Again, nobody is saying that things are perfect. We got a long, long way to go. Certainly we have a long way to go. But when you have the resources that are coming, that means you have the opportunities to turn these things around. So it's up to us to make sure that it happens. They can only do so much is to send the information or to send the resources. Again, $1.6 billion and high-speed internet is going to be made available because we have many of areas in Chicago, many of areas in Illinois that do not have access to internet. $1.6 billion supporting that, $982 million in clean water, $337 million in replacement of lead pipes, which we know that this largely impacts the development of our children. To make sure that we have clean water, $249 million in clean transportation to include $107.3 million in electric vehicle chargers, $52 million for clean transit buses, $90 million for clean school buses, $239 million to clean up pollution, $1.4 billion for to strengthen our communities' readiness for a climate impact. These are just some of the items in one state, in our state. Now, for those of you who think that Republicans are your friends, they think, or you think, because I saw some people, and I'm going to refrain from calling any names because that's, I'm not here to make anybody feel bad. But I want you to learn, and I want you to know the facts. Republicans have never wanted for Black people, and I'm talking to specifically Black folks. They don't care about poor people. They really don't care about poor people, meaning poor white people. They have no concern about the people in their community. But what I want to show you is I want to show you from, I believe this is 1980, Paul Wayward. Some of you may or may not know. But this is a clip of what Republicans actually think. This is their model. And you have Tim Scott, senator, going around fanning and playing up to Donald Trump because he wants to be his VP. And I'm going to refrain from getting all focused on him. But this is the message of what Republicans think about you participating in the electoral process. Listen, this is what they said back then. This is what they're legislating right now.
Now, many of our Christians have what I call the goo-goo syndrome. Good government. They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
Council started by this man. You got to hear this again.
Now, many of our Christians have what I call the goo-goo syndrome. Good government. They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
The so-called moral majority. Now, for those of you who were all upset and still all upset with Joe Biden and all upset with migrants and listening to Donald Trump and his rhetoric about migrants are coming, illegals are taking your jobs. There is zero evidence that Black people have been impacted in a negative way because of migrants coming over the border, taking your jobs. Zero evidence of this. There is evidence, hard evidence, of white, heterosexual Republicans, men and women, legislating your jobs out of town. So while they are, Donald Trump is going around and he goes to a Black church into Detroit and fueling those lies about migrants taking your jobs, it wasn't a migrant who refused to enforce the antitrust laws when they got elected in 1980. It was Ronald Reagan and his Department of Justice that he instructed not to enforce the antitrust laws. It was Ronald Reagan who decided to lift all kinds of regulations. It was Ronald Reagan who decided that corporations could shift their jobs overseas and have very loose regulations in terms of them paying their fair share. And as a result of that, we lost more than 47,000 good manufacturing businesses to the tune of 23 million jobs. That has devastated our labor market. And it's certainly devastated black employment here in Chicago. Ronald Reagan came into office, 70% of all black employment was in labor in 1980. By 1986, that number dropped to 28% because of Ronald Reagan's policies. Not a migrant, not an illegal alien, but a full-fledged American citizen with the stroke of a pen and the power of the presidency. And they would have this war on men. When Ronald Reagan came into office, there were 180,000 black men in prison in 1980. Because of Ronald Reagan's war on black men on steroids, by 1986, that number had gone to 660,000 black men incarcerated. That didn't happen by an illegal. It didn't happen by a migrant. It didn't even happen by a foreigner. It didn't happen by a Hispanic person. It happened by a white male heterosexual supported by other white men and women who voted for those policies, who supported those positions, who enforced his deregulations, his policies, not migrants, not illegal aliens. These were full-fledged American citizens who did that to you. Not some poor person coming across the border out of the conditions that they're trying to escape. And they got you watching poor migrants while they're shifting your jobs out of town and giving fat tax breaks to their rich and super wealthy friends. And got you all upset with migrants who are not your problem. So for those of you who want to walk around with MAGA hats on and Trump tees and Trump gold gym shoes, as though that is some sort of way of fighting back, you're misinformed, you're confused to think that somehow Donald Trump and the people who support Donald Trump care anything about you. You are sadly, sadly confused. And I hope that we and those of us who study this information can provide you with the truth of this information, that you can make informed decisions and the right decisions, and then get involved in making those people that we can best work with and get things done with, that we can apply the kinds of pressure on those persons and work with those persons to put the kinds of policies in place to continue to liberate and to free our communities. Republicans love nothing more than for you to be distracted, misinformed. And then they go in the back room and cut their deals and laugh. You have people like Byron Donaldson, who tries to purport that somehow Jim Crow was a better era for us. One ignorant man sitting in a room with some more people who are misinformed, who are ignorant of history, and certainly ignorant of the facts of what Jim Crow meant. And then trying to defend it because, whenever you're correct about something, you don't have to go on the circuit trying to defend yourself, as he did, which is indefensible. But he's playing to one audience. Now, this is a man who represents largely a mostly black or mostly white district, who is in an interracial marriage, and that's his business. But you need to understand what their identification is. They, although in black skin, don't identify or even want to identify with the conditions of black people. Now, you can be married to whoever you want to be married to. I'm just simply observing what the facts are. And to ever suggest that somehow black folks were doing better off during Jim Crow, that's indefensible. And I think that anybody who has platforms to reach people, to misuse those platforms to put out misinformation and to misguide people, down the wrong path. Now, I fundamentally believe that we're going to have to work very hard to ensure that President Biden and Kamala Harris gets reelected. Now, there are several reasons why you have so many people who are supporting a convicted rapist and a convicted felon, and some person, and it is astonishing to know that there are so many people who support that. But I think that it's also revealing to us that there are people who will there are people who are just revealing to us that the kinds of racial progress that many of us hoped that we've made, that we didn't make as great a strides as we thought. that there are people who Donald Trump represents. Now, he's a mere symptom, but he's gotten to the highest office and given license to people who had and harbored that kind of thoughts, those kind of sentiments, those kind of feelings, those kind of grievances, and giving them license that you can now act out on them. Because I do it, and thereby it's okay for you to do it. But you and I don't have to drop down to the doldrums of that kind of low. But we do have to be vigilant. We have to fight. We have to instruct. We have to inform. We have to make sure that we understand the information so that when we come across people who for the most part are not going to read, who are not going to research this information, it's up to you and I to help them to know the facts. Because when people hear the facts, when they actually hear the truth, you can get people to shift. They just need to know the truth. The Republicans and the so-called conservatives have a much wider grip on the media and control of the media. Mitt Romney bought Clear Channel and put Air America out of business. They control a great deal of the mainstream media. And so therefore, they control a lot of the narrative and what actually gets out. So we have to use the little resources that we have and the digital outlets that we have to, one, get informed, and to inform the other people in our trusted circles, in our communities. You have to go to the places where people are not going to spend a lot of time watching the news or reading the newspapers. You have to go to them, and you have to be willing to go to those spaces and share information. Sometimes that means going on a corner and hanging out where people hang out that are potential voters. Reaching those people who are largely left out. Talked about 135 million poor or low-wage people in this country today that represent 40% of the electorate. We got to reach those people. William Barber, who we are trying to get on the program, and hopefully that we'll be able to have them on the program before they go down to Washington, D.C. for the Poor People's Campaign on the March on Washington on June 29th. We're trying to see if we can't facilitate and get that interview scheduled with Reverend Barber to talk about the Poor People's Campaign. You don't even, I think we rarely hear people talking about the impoverished. We have to deal with that. Crime, violence, they are inextricably tied to areas where people are poor, which means that people have lack of the very basic resources that they need. So wherever you have high rates of poverty, you're going to have high rates of negatives, violence and crime. Dorothy Tucker just did, and it's coming up this week. I believe it's Thursday night. She has been doing this series, this investigative stories here in Chicago, where Black women are only 16% of the population, but yet they represent 30% of all crimes reported in the city of Chicago. We've got to change those conditions. We have the resources coming in, but we have got to get ourselves in position to make sure that we are addressing those concerns. And to address those concerns is we've got to make sure that the people who are engaged in this high-risk activity have opportunities to go to a good-paying job, to not have to resort to these dangerous, deadly, destructive, hurtful acts in order to survive. Now, am I saying that everybody who is doing that? No. But there is a lot of people who act in desperate ways because their conditions are not very good. So we have to do what we know that we can do to make sure that we lift everybody up out of the doldrums. It is not enough for a preferential few to be successful so that you can stand on a mountain and you can see all the despair around you. We got to make sure, because we do live in a place of plenty, and we got to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to do that. Republicans don't care about that. They've not shown one iota of a policy that they have initiated or put forth. The only thing that they can show is that they want to protect a criminal so that that person can get into positions of power that they can manipulate and further their policies of disadvantagement and disinvestment and blow up our democratic process. That's what they're interested in. And what we need to do in order to clean it up and to improve it is that we need to do everything that we can to make sure that we win this next election by the widest of margins, by getting rid of as many people in Republican positions as we can. The best thing that we could do is re-elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, in that we can take the House back, in that Hakeem Jeffries will become the Speaker of the House, and give the president the majority in the Senate in order for us to really right, or certainly improve, and to do away with this extremist, destructive group within the Republican conference, and to continue making the kind of progress to lift people and to make people's lives better. That's what we can do. That's what we need to focus on doing. We don't need to just barely win an election. We need to make sure that we win this election and send a real referendum on the kinds of chaos and confusion and corruption that these people, the Jim Jordans and Mike Johnsons and the Marjorie Taylor Greens, and what these people represent. We have to neutralize these people. We might not be able to get rid of them because of the districts that they're in and the gerrymandering that they've done, but boy, will we have the opportunity. That's why we've got to make sure that we get to every possible person to make sure that they're registered to vote and get them to the polls to vote the right way. That's what we have to concentrate and focus on these next 6 months, 5 months that we have. I think it's 60, 76 days, whatever it is that we have. And to get out of the misinformation, and the fodder, and all of that nonsense. If we're going to save our basic democratic process that we have to try to improve our nation, then that's what we need to do on November the 5th. We need to take control of our government where we can pass policies. We can get rid of these crazies, neutralize them to the point to where they're just inconsequential. But it doesn't matter, their rhetoric, because they're non-productive anyway. They're not interested in being productive. They're not interested in progress. They are interested in one thing and one thing only: blowing up our democratic process. Is it perfect? No. But it's going to be a lot worse if we go to sleep. All right, that's going to do it for this week on the Monday night edition of the People Show. We'll be back here next Monday for another edition of the People Show. I ask that you, if you certainly tune in, that you like and that you would share this with your friends and your trusted circles on your outlet. And we will continue to work to bring you informative, useful information that we can go on and we can win back and continue to make the kind of progress that we see making. Play the long game, not the short game. Until next week. And as a matter of fact, I'll see you Saturday right back here for the Saturday edition of the People Show's Legal Hour with Judge Leonard Murray. And then, of course, we may have some special shows in between. We're going to have more to provide these. Like I said, next week when we come back, we're going to talk about that. I want to show you how the administration and what the administration is doing in maybe your community. If you live in Florida, if you live in Ohio, wherever it is that you live, we're going to go through some of those so that you can see how these policies of what this presidency and why elections matter as to who is in power. We're going to talk about all of that coming up on the next edition of the People Show. All right, so that's going to do it for us tonight. Thank you all so much for tuning in to the broadcast. Until the next time on intellectualradio.com, good night.